The mist hung low over Oakridge Cemetery that morning, wrapping tombstones in ghostly shrouds. Thomas Miller, the town's gravedigger for 30 years, leaned on his shovel, watching from the shadow of an ancient oak. Pastor Whitaker moved furtively between graves, glancing over his shoulder before kneeling at the Henderson family plot. Thomas narrowed his eyes as the pastor slipped an envelope beneath a small stone marker, patting it firmly into place. Something about the pastor's secretive movements stirred unease in Thomas's chest. The cemetery kept many secrets, but this one seemed different, like it was waiting to be found. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss what happens next in this mysterious tale. Thomas Miller had been Oakridge's gravedigger since his father passed the shovel to him 3 decades ago. The townspeople respected his work but kept their distance, as if his proximity to death might somehow be contagious. His calloused hands and weathered face told a story of countless graves dug through summer heat and winter frost. The cemetery was more home to him than the small cottage at its edge where he lived alone. Behind Thomas's stoic demeanor lay a wound that had never properly healed. 15 years ago, his wife Eleanor and their unborn child had died during childbirth. The town had mourned briefly, but life moved on for everyone except Thomas. He buried them himself, hardest grave he'd ever dug, and with them he buried his capacity for joy. The irony wasn't lost on him that he spent his days creating spaces for others' grief while his own remained unaddressed. His simple goal these days was maintaining dignity in his solitude. He took pride in keeping the cemetery immaculate, each headstone respected, each plot tended with care. The dead deserved that much, he believed. Pastor Whitaker had arrived in Oakridge 12 years ago, quickly becoming the town's moral compass. His charismatic sermons drew crowds, his charity work earned admiration, and his counsel was sought by all, except Thomas, who preferred the honest company of the departed. The Sunday following Thomas's discovery at the Henderson plot, he attended church for the first time in years. During announcement, he raised his hand. "I've noticed some unusual activity in the cemetery," Thomas began. The pastor's smile remained fixed, but his eyes hardened. "Our groundskeeper seems confused about his role," Whitaker interrupted smoothly. "Cemetery maintenance doesn't include monitoring visitors paying respects." Laughter rippled through the congregation. Thomas felt his face burn as whispers spread. Perhaps spending so much time with the dead has affected poor Miller's mind, someone murmured loudly enough for all to hear. The pastor placed a sympathetic hand on Thomas's shoulder. "We appreciate your dedication, but perhaps leave matters of spiritual concern to those qualified to address them." As Thomas slunk back to his seat, he caught the pastor's warning glance. The message was clear: stay in your place, gravedigger. But Thomas had seen what he'd seen, and the envelope beneath that stone now represented more than just a secret. It was a challenge to the carefully maintained order of Oakridge. For weeks following the church incident, Thomas found himself the subject of sidelong glances and hushed conversations that abruptly ceased when he approached. He tried to focus on his work, but Pastor Whitaker seemed determined to make his life increasingly difficult. One Tuesday morning, Thomas discovered the pastor leading a small group through the cemetery, something that normally wouldn't bother him, except they were trampling across freshly planted grass on recent graves. "Excuse me," Thomas called out, approaching with measured steps. "The grass there is just taking root. Perhaps you could use the pathways." Pastor Whitaker turned, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Oh, our vigilant gravedigger. We're conducting a historical tour of Oakridge's founding families." He gestured broadly. "These good people have donated generously to our church restoration fund." "I understand, but..." "Thomas," the pastor cut him off, "these are the Hendersons and Caldwells. Their ancestors built this town while yours was. What was your grandfather again?" "The man who drank himself to death behind the old mill." The wealthy visitors shifted uncomfortably as Thomas's face flushed. He'd never mentioned his grandfather's struggles to anyone. "The pathways are there for a reason," Thomas managed before retreating to his shed, the sound of the pastor's performative apology to the group following him. Poor man, isolation does strange things to people. 2 days later, Thomas arrived at work to find a notice tacked to his shed door. The cemetery board, headed by Pastor Whitaker, had voted to review his position, citing concerns about professional conduct and mental fitness. The meeting was scheduled for the following week. That Sunday, Thomas forced himself to attend church again, hoping to speak reasonably with board members before the review. As the congregation filed out after service, he approached Mrs. Harmon, the board secretary. I'd like to discuss the upcoming review, he began quietly. Before she could respond, Pastor Whitaker materialized between them. Thomas, seeking spiritual guidance at last. Actually, I wanted to speak with Mrs. Harmon about your review, yes, the pastor said loudly, drawing attention from nearby parishioners. I'm afraid your behavior has become increasingly erratic. Just yesterday, the Wilsons reported seeing you talking to yourself among the gravestones. Thomas stiffened. I was reading inscriptions aloud, and last week, digging at night by lantern light. Most unusual. The Peterson funeral was the next morning. The ground was frozen. Then there's your obsession with certain plots. The pastor's voice dropped to a theatrical whisper that carried perfectly. Particularly concerning, given your history of mental instability after your wife's passing. The gathered crowd murmured. Thomas felt the ground shift beneath him as years of respectful distance transformed into something uglier, suspicion. I've never been unstable, Thomas said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. Of course you wouldn't think so, Whitaker replied with exaggerated compassion. That's why we're concerned. As Thomas walked away, humiliation burning in his chest, he heard the pastor adding, Poor man, perhaps institutional care would be best. That night, Thomas sat at his small kitchen table, a stack of leather-bound journals before him, his father's records and his grandfather's before that. 3 generations of Miller men had served as Oakridge's gravediggers, recording not just burials but observations, conversations, and secrets. His fingers traced the neat columns of his own precise handwriting, dates, names, locations, and notes spanning 30 years. What Pastor Whitaker didn't know was that Thomas had documented everything, including the pastor's midnight visits to the Henderson plot, which had begun precisely 1 month after his arrival in Oakridge 12 years ago. Thomas might be just a gravedigger to the town, but he was also its most meticulous historian, and he knew exactly where to dig for truth. From the county courthouse window, Judge Eleanor Blackwood observed Thomas's retreat from the church. She tapped her pen thoughtfully against her desk calendar, circling the date of the cemetery board meeting. Perhaps it's time someone examined Whitaker's records instead, she murmured. Thomas Miller had always been invisible to the people of Oakridge. They saw the gravedigger, not the man, a silent figure who appeared when needed and vanished when his duty was done. What they failed to understand was that invisibility granted him a unique perspective. From his humble shed at the cemetery's edge, Thomas had witnessed 12 years of Pastor Whitaker's midnight visits to the Henderson plot, visits that never aligned with anniversaries or holidays when mourners typically came. That evening, Thomas sat at his kitchen table surrounded by the leather-bound journals of 3 generations of Miller men. His grandfather had begun the tradition, recording not just names and burial locations but observations about the town's hidden rhythms. His father had continued it, and Thomas had perfected the practice, creating a meticulous archive of Oakridge's secrets. The truth lies 6 feet under, his father used to say, but it never stays buried forever. Thomas flipped through his most recent journal, finding the entries about Whitaker's nocturnal visits. Every 4th Wednesday, regardless of weather, the pastor would arrive at midnight, kneel beside Old Man Henderson's headstone, and appear to pray. But Thomas had noticed something else, the way Whitaker would occasionally lift the small decorative stone beside the grave marker, place something beneath it, then replace it carefully. What are you hiding, Pastor? Thomas murmured, running his finger down the dates. 12 years of visits, never missing a month. The telephone rang, startling him from his thoughts. Few people ever called. Mr. Miller? Eleanor Blackwood here. Thomas straightened at the judge's formal tone. Yes, Your Honor. I understand the cemetery board has scheduled a review of your position. Yes, ma'am. Next Tuesday. I see. There was a pause. Mr. Miller, how long have you maintained the cemetery records? 30 years myself. My father for 40 before that. And these records, they're quite detailed, I imagine. Thomas glanced at the journals. Yes, ma'am. Everything's documented, including visitors, even after hours. His pulse quickened. Everything. I'd be interested in reviewing those records sometime, Mr. Miller. Particularly regarding the Henderson plot. Thomas's grip tightened on the receiver. May I ask why, Your Honor? Let's just say I've been watching Pastor Whitaker's administrative decisions with interest. The church funds have shown some irregularities over the years. After hanging up, Thomas made his decision. The board meeting was 5 days away. He couldn't wait. That night, he would discover what Whitaker had been hiding all these years. The cemetery was different at night, not frightening to Thomas, but intimate, like visiting old friends after the world had gone to sleep. The quarter moon provided just enough light as he made his way to the Henderson plot, lantern dimmed and footsteps silent on the familiar paths. Old man Henderson had been wealthy but reclusive, dying without apparent heirs 12 years ago, shortly before Whitaker's arrival in Oakridge. His grave was marked by a modest headstone, with a small decorative stone placed beside it. Thomas knelt, setting his lantern down. He glanced around, confirming he was alone, then carefully lifted the decorative stone. Beneath it was a small hollow in the earth, and inside, an envelope, yellowed with age but protected from the elements by a plastic covering. His hands trembled slightly as he extracted it. The envelope was sealed, addressed simply to the finder. Thomas hesitated, then carefully opened it. Inside was a letter and a small key. The letter, written in a shaky hand, began, "If you are reading this, you have discovered what Pastor James Whitaker has tried to keep hidden." Thomas read by lantern light, his eyes widening. Henderson's letter detailed how Whitaker had approached him in his final days, offering spiritual comfort while pressuring him to change his will. Henderson, suspicious, had pretended to comply, but had secretly established a trust for his estranged daughter, a trust that would mature in exactly 12 years, with documents secured in a safe deposit box at Oakridge Bank. The key would open it. "Whitaker believes he has secured my fortune for his church renovations," the letter continued. "He doesn't know about my daughter or the real will. I've played along, knowing my time is short. I've instructed my lawyer to reveal nothing until the trust matures. Whitaker visits to ensure his secret remains buried, never suspecting I've left this letter. If you're reading this, the 12 years are nearly complete. Find my daughter, Sarah Henderson Walsh, in Millfield. Tell her the truth." The date on the letter was exactly 12 years ago, which meant the trust would mature that very week. Thomas carefully refolded the letter, his mind racing. This explained everything. Whitaker's sudden interest in removing him from his position, the accusations of instability. The pastor must be planning to claim Henderson's fortune before the truth emerged. As Thomas replaced the stone, twigs snapped nearby. He extinguished his lantern immediately, crouching low beside the grave. "Who's there?" came Whitaker's voice, a flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. Thomas remained perfectly still, his heart pounding. The beam swept over the headstone, pausing momentarily on the decorative stone. "Must have been an animal," Whitaker muttered, but he approached the grave anyway, kneeling to check the stone. Thomas held his breath as the pastor lifted it, then heard Whitaker's sigh of relief. "Still there," he whispered, replacing the stone carefully. After Whitaker departed, Thomas waited another hour before retrieving the envelope again. He needed evidence, but he also needed to protect himself. With careful hands, he made his way back to his shed, where he photographed the letter and key with the old Polaroid camera his father had used to document vandalism. The next morning, Thomas visited the county courthouse, requesting a meeting with Judge Blackwood. Her secretary seemed surprised, but ushered him into the judge's chambers promptly. "Mr. Miller," the judge said, gesturing to a chair. "This is unexpected." Thomas placed the envelope and photographs on her desk. "I believe you were right to be concerned about Pastor Whitaker, Your Honor." As she read Henderson's letter, her expression shifted from curiosity to grave concern. "This is extremely serious, Mr. Miller. Attempted fraud, possible coercion of a dying man. The trust matures this week," Thomas said. "And my review is Tuesday." Judge Blackwood nodded thoughtfully. Convenient timing for the pastor. She studied the key. "We need to secure these documents immediately, and I should contact the state prosecutor." She looked up at Thomas. "You realize Whitaker will deny everything. I have 12 years of documented visits in my journals. And the letter itself, which he'll claim you fabricated." She tapped her pen against her desk. "We need to move carefully. I'll have my clerk reschedule your review, citing administrative reasons. That should buy us time. And Henderson's daughter, I'll have her located. In the meantime, Mr. Miller, keep this to yourself and continue your normal routine. If Whitaker suspects you know anything." Thomas nodded, understanding the unspoken warning. As he left the courthouse, Thomas noticed Pastor Whitaker watching from across the street, his expression darkening when he spotted Thomas emerging from the judge's chambers. Thomas nodded politely and continued walking, feeling the pastor's eyes boring into his back. That afternoon, a courthouse clerk delivered an official notice to the church office. Due to scheduling conflicts with essential personnel, the cemetery board review of Thomas Miller's position is postponed indefinitely by judicial order. The small gesture of protection from Judge Blackwood gave Thomas the breathing room he needed. As he tended the graves that afternoon, he felt a strange peace. For 30 years, he had been the keeper of Oakridge's dead. Now, he would be the voice for one who could no longer speak for himself. The truth had been buried for 12 years. It was time for it to rise. What do you think will happen next in this small-town mystery? Comment below and tell us where you're watching from. I'd love to know which corner of the world this story has reached. The next morning, Thomas found his shed door ajar. Inside, his journals were missing, and a note lay on his workbench. I know what you took. Meet me at Henderson's grave tonight, or everyone learns what really happened in '85. Thomas stared at the note, his weathered hands trembling slightly. The reference to '85 sent a chill through his body. A dark chapter he believed was sealed forever. Someone was playing a dangerous game, and he knew exactly who that someone was. He reached for his phone and dialed Judge Blackwood's number. "They took my journals," he said when she answered. "And they know about '85. There was a long pause on the other end. "Come to my chambers." Now, an hour later, Thomas sat across from Judge Blackwood and District Attorney Harmon, a stern woman with silver-streaked hair and eyes that missed nothing. "This changes things," Harmon said after Thomas explained the situation. "Whitaker is escalating. The threat about '85, what exactly happened that year, Mr. Miller?" Thomas looked down at his calloused hands. "There was an accident. A young man, drunk, crashed his car into the cemetery, damaged several headstones. I found him unconscious and called for help, but he died before the ambulance arrived." He paused. His father was a prominent businessman. He paid to have the incident minimized. "And Whitaker knows this?" Judge Blackwood asked. "He performed the funeral. He must have suspected something wasn't right with the story." Harmon nodded. "So he's threatening to expose this if you don't back down about Henderson's letter." "We need to move faster than I thought," Judge Blackwood said. "I've located Henderson's daughter in Seattle. She's flying in tomorrow morning." "That's not soon enough," Thomas said. "The note says to meet tonight." "Then we'll be ready tonight," Harmon replied. "Mr. Miller, I need you to do exactly as the note says. Meet Whitaker at Henderson's grave." "You want me to confront him alone?" "Not alone," Judge Blackwood assured him. "We'll have officers nearby, recording everything. We need him to incriminate himself." Thomas felt a knot forming in his stomach. "And if he doesn't, then we'll have to hope Henderson's daughter can help us access whatever that key unlocks," Harmon said. "But first, we need to know exactly what Whitaker knows and what he wants." As dusk settled over Oakridge Cemetery, Thomas walked the familiar paths between the gravestones. The evening air was unusually still, as if the dead themselves were holding their breath. He carried a small recording device in his pocket, courtesy of the district attorney's office. Henderson's grave was in the older section, beneath a sprawling oak tree. As Thomas approached, he saw a figure already waiting, not Pastor Whitaker, but his assistant, Deacon Powell. "Where's Whitaker?" Thomas asked, stopping several feet away. Powell smiled thinly. "The pastor thought it best not to be seen meeting with you, given the circumstances. I'm here to negotiate on his behalf." "Negotiate what?" "A simple exchange. The letter and key for your journals and our silence about the unfortunate events of 1985. Thomas felt his pulse quicken. "And if I refuse?" "Then by this time tomorrow, everyone in town will know how Thomas Miller let young Michael Prescott bleed out rather than call for help immediately. How you and his father concocted a story to protect the family name and your job. That's not what happened. It's what people will believe," Powell said coldly. "Especially when Pastor Whitaker confirms the details he's kept secret all these years out of Christian charity." Thomas took a deep breath. What does Whitaker want with Henderson's trust? The money was meant for his daughter. Powell's expression hardened. "The church has needs." Henderson was confused in his final days. "Surely you noticed. The pastor was simply helping him make proper arrangements. By forging documents after his death, a flicker of surprise crossed Powell's face. "You read the letter." "Every word." Powell stepped closer. "Then you understand the position you're in. The letter and key, Miller. Tonight, or tomorrow, your reputation dies in this town. From the shadows beyond the oak tree, a voice called out, "I believe that's enough, Deacon Powell." Judge Blackwood emerged into the fading light, followed by D.A. Harmon and 2 police officers. Powell's face drained of color. "This is a private conversation about blackmail and fraud," Harmon said, stepping forward. "We heard everything. You have no proof of anything," Powell stammered, backing away. "Actually," came another voice, "we have quite a lot." Pastor Whitaker stepped from behind a large memorial stone, his face ashen. Behind him stood Sheriff Davis, holding the pastor's arm firmly. "Found him trying to access the courthouse records room," the sheriff explained. "Had quite a collection of documents with him, including what appears to be practice runs of Henderson's signature." Thomas stared at Whitaker. "What? You were respected, trusted." For a moment, the pastor's mask slipped, revealing raw desperation. "The church is drowning in debt. Henderson's trust was worth millions. Money his daughter, who hasn't visited in 15 years, doesn't deserve. I was saving the congregation. By stealing and lying?" Thomas asked. "By doing what was necessary," Whitaker snapped. "Just like you did in '85. Judge Blackwood stepped between them. "The difference, Pastor, is that Mr. Miller has agreed to face the consequences of his past actions. He came to me voluntarily yesterday to amend his statement about the Prescott incident." Thomas felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. It had been part of their plan, clearing the air about his own past so Whitaker couldn't use it against him. "Officers, please take Pastor Whitaker and Deacon Powell into custody," Harmon instructed. As they were led away, Thomas noticed a figure standing at the cemetery gates, a woman in her 40s, watching intently. Judge Blackwood followed his gaze. "That's Catherine Henderson." Her flight got in early. Thomas walked slowly toward Henderson's daughter, the key heavy in his pocket. 12 years of secrets were about to be revealed, and he wasn't sure what they would uncover. The safety deposit box could contain anything, more evidence against Whitaker, or perhaps secrets that Henderson himself had wanted buried. As he reached Catherine, Thomas faced a choice: hand over the key immediately as was her right, or convince her to open the box with witnesses present, protecting them all from whatever truths might emerge. "Ms. Henderson," he said, extending his hand. "I knew your father well. We need to talk about what happens next." Catherine Henderson's eyes were tired but sharp, studying Thomas with a mixture of wariness and curiosity. "Mr. Miller, I presume? The gravedigger my father spoke of in his letters. He wrote about me?" Thomas asked, surprised. "More than you might imagine." She glanced toward the police cars where Whitaker and Powell were being placed in separate vehicles. "I've been investigating from afar for months." Dad's letters became increasingly confused, then suddenly stopped altogether. "When I called, the pastor always had excuses why Dad couldn't come to the phone." Thomas nodded slowly. "Your father knew something was wrong. That's why he left this." He produced the key from his pocket. "It opens a safety deposit box at First National. I believe it contains evidence against Whitaker and Powell." Judge Blackwood approached them. "Ms. Henderson, we'd like to request your permission to open that box with official witnesses present." "Of course," she agreed. "I want everything on record." The next morning, they gathered at the bank. Catherine, Thomas, Judge Blackwood, D.A. Harmon, and Sheriff Davis. The bank manager led them to the vault, where Catherine inserted the key into box number 317. Inside lay a leather-bound journal, a USB drive, and several folders of financial documents. Catherine handed the materials to the DA, who began examining them immediately. "My God," Harmon whispered after several minutes. "Whitaker wasn't just stealing from Henderson's trust. He's been embezzling church funds for years, funneling them through shell companies. Powell helped launder the money through real estate deals." Sheriff Davis shook his head. "The church renovation project never happened," Harmon confirmed. "The money went offshore." Catherine's voice was tight with anger. "My father discovered this, didn't he?" Thomas nodded. "And they poisoned him slowly to silence him, adjusting his medications, according to his letter. We'll need to exhume the body," Sheriff Davis said quietly. 3 weeks later, the town of Millfield gathered for an unusual Sunday service. The church, normally packed with over 200 parishioners, held barely 50. At the pulpit stood not Pastor Whitaker, but Catherine Henderson. "My father loved this church," she began. "He believed in its mission to serve this community. That's why the evidence he gathered was so devastating to him, not just the theft of his own legacy, but the betrayal of everything this congregation stands for. From his seat in the back row, Thomas watched faces crumple with grief and anger. The toxicology report had confirmed their worst suspicions. Harold Henderson had been slowly poisoned with increasing doses of arsenic, likely administered through the special tea Whitaker brought him daily. Pastor Whitaker had confessed to the financial crimes but denied the murder charges. Deacon Powell had quickly turned state's evidence, revealing a scheme that had lasted nearly a decade. The church was indeed in debt, but only because its funds had been systematically looted. After the service, Catherine approached Thomas in the cemetery where he was tending to her father's grave. "The DA says Whitaker will likely get 20 years, she said. "Powell less, due to his cooperation." "It doesn't seem enough." "It never is," Thomas replied, placing fresh flowers on the grave. "I'm selling my father's house," Catherine continued. "But I decided to donate the trust money to rebuild the church's finances, with proper oversight this time." Thomas looked up surprised. "After everything that happened, the church isn't the building or its leaders," she said. "It's the people who believed in something better." She paused. "Dad's journal mentioned you often, you know. He called you the honest man who carries our burdens. He trusted you." Thomas felt tears threatening. "I wish I could have saved him." "You did what mattered most," Catherine said softly. "You made sure the truth wasn't buried with him." As the seasons changed in Millfield, Thomas settled back into his routine at the cemetery, though everything felt different now. The weight of Harold's secret had lifted from his shoulders, replaced by a quiet sense of purpose. The townspeople no longer averted their eyes when they saw him. Many even stopped to chat, sharing memories of loved ones as he worked. The church was slowly healing too. A new pastor had arrived, a humble woman who focused on rebuilding trust rather than grand sermons. Thomas often saw Catherine there, working alongside volunteers to restore what had been broken. One crisp autumn morning, Thomas was clearing leaves when Catherine approached with a thermos. "Thought you might need this," she said, pouring him coffee. "It's getting colder." "Thank you," he replied, grateful for the warmth. "How are the renovations coming?" "Slowly but honestly this time," she smiled. "The congregation is smaller but stronger." As they talked, Thomas noticed a black sedan parked beyond the cemetery gates. The same car had appeared several times in recent weeks, its driver never emerging. "Someone you know?" Catherine asked, following his gaze. "No," Thomas frowned. "But they've been watching." 3 times now. The car pulled away before they could approach, leaving Thomas with an uneasy feeling. Just when peace had returned to Millfield, something or someone was stirring the dust again. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to hear more tales of buried secrets and small-town mysteries. Like this video and share your thoughts about what might be coming next for Thomas and Catherine.